So Lauren, why are real estate agents being brainwashed in today's market?
Yeah, no, it's certainly something very interesting and something that I've been following loosely until it kind of came to a head last week.
Hi there, this is Jess Uphoff, and this is this episode of This Jess'd In. I'm here with my co-host, Elise Santani, and my dear friend and partner, Lauryn Dempsey. She's a local real estate agent here in the Denver market, and she is crushing it and has a very interesting background. I'm very excited to talk to Lauren today. But I want to start off with a claim that Lauren's made that we're going to dive deep into, which is Lauren believes that agents are being brainwashed. That agents have a narrative warfare is what she's calling it. And so don't read a book by its cover is what Lauren's saying. So let's dig into that right away.
And ultimately, there's a lot of conversation about clear cooperation and seller choice. And you're seeing large brokerages, specifically one, really target Zillow and go after the emotional nature of agents. And so that brokerage is Compass. And if you follow anything about Rob Refkin or any Compass agent, you're seeing they're really pushing this narrative about seller choice and how sellers deserve to have the opportunity to market their homes however they choose to, even if that's behind a walled garden on their private exclusive website. So really kind of keeping inventory in-house. And so I agree with that to an extent, and I agree that there needs to be a lot of change that has to happen in the industry. But when you zoom out and listen to the messaging and really analyze it, it's quite alarming and disturbing what's actually going on in our industry. And when I say brainwash, really it's a narrative warfare, and they're pushing this narrative on agents. And kind of the bottom line and takeaway of it is control the agents, influence the consumer, become the platform. And what I mean the platform is Compass becoming the platform that consumers use in the future because of this narrative warfare that's happening to influence both agents and consumers.
It's so fascinating because Lauren sent me a discussion where Rob Refkin was talking and basically speaking to his agents at their most recent sales rally. And I watched it, and I observed it and watched it the way that he intended it to be, right? Like I was in that demographic that could get brainwashed, and all the reasons that he said, like, this is why a seller deserves to list their home the way that they want to, resonated with me. I was like,
what were the reasons?
Like having the damaged property, basically, if your house has been on the market for 90 days, it basically will impact the seller's bottom line because any buyer comes in, they're like, 90 days, I'm going to lowball you, basically. So they consider it like a damaged property. So when they go off market to do exclusive private listing, basically you don't have that historical data in the MLS that shows it as damaged. That resonated with me. I was like, yes, that makes perfect sense, especially in today's market when we have longer days on market. So I watched this, and then she's like, what do you think? And I was like, wow. And I started giving all the reasons from the brainwashed perspective of why I was like, yes, I think it's needed. We got to go after Zillow. The organized real estate are out to get us, So
you drank the Kool-Aid.
I drank the Kool-Aid and listened to the narrative. And then she and I had a conversation, and she's like, think about it from this angle, though. And basically what I found really fascinating was, why is Rob Refkin not trying to join forces with the owner of RE/MAX and Gary Keller and Berkshire Hathaway and saying it's us against organized real estate, which is basically the National Association of Realtors, Zillow, and some of these other entities that are trying to tell realtors how they're allowed to do their job, right? And so the fact that he is wanting to basically take it on just Compass really does. When she explained it to me, she's like, yeah, he wants to become the
platform.
The platform.
The platform
the
of
most
consumer
visited,
choice.
because right now it's Zillow, right? Like
Zillow by far.
Yeah.
There's no comparison. Everyone goes to Zillow.
Is it still, so is this happening right now with Compass,
Oh, yeah.
for example?
Oh, I mean,
so if I'm a Compass agent and I list your house, it's not going to show up on Zillow?
I mean, that's what they're pushing for. And as a result, Zillow's come back and says, if you're pushing this information off market and not visible to all consumers, then that listing is going to be banned for the lifetime of the listing with that agent. And so the agent's ability to get a home on Zillow, which is by far the most visited platform, is now being compromised as a result of this warfare going on between big tech companies and really influencing us on the ground, whether you're at Compass or not.
Right.
Because part of what I did before is like I would test the market in my own way. Yes, are there rules? Am I willing to accept some consequences by not following the MLS rules? Absolutely, because it's in the best interest of my seller. I literally just had a review written yesterday from one of my sellers who I did this same exact thing earlier this year. I tested the market with some advertising. I didn't put it on the MLS or anything like that because I really wanted to understand the feedback we were getting from consumers, and it was positive and it influenced how we went to the market. So in one aspect, I certainly understand the desire to test the market. In certain cases, this was a very unique property that hadn't sold before, and we had to do some things to make sure it stood out. And so I understand that. But now, as a result of of this Compass versus Zillow battle, I can no longer do that because if I try to advertise something on my own outside of these platforms and not on the MLS, then I risk getting banned from Zillow, which is the most important platform in our market right now. And so it really does have second and third order effects on agents who aren't even part of of Compass. And why is this brokerage unilaterally deciding how real estate should be done? Why are we not collaborating? Why are the leaders of these brokerages
coming together and saying, this is what's best for the realtor, this is what's best for the consumer? That's not what's happening. This is capitalism. Basically, like Zillow wants to make as much money as possible and become the most powerful real estate entity. And Compass wants to become, and they are also, and so they're just at odds. And it's capitalism, and it's not necessarily about the seller, the buyer, or the agent.
Well, in Rob's speech, he said there are two audiences he wanted to address. He said the seller and the agent. He didn't say anything about the buyer in that speech.
That's what I was just thinking. So if I'm a buyer, I cannot see any of the listings that Compass has?
Unless you're working with a Compass agent.
So if I was working with you and you're with Real, you wouldn't have any access to that?
No. And I tried signing up to get access to it. And essentially what happened was it took 6-8 hours to get a phone call from Compass's headquarters or whatever.
And they tried to recruit you?
No, I tried to just see the listings, right? And they refused to give me access to the listings because they required me to get connected with a Compass agent in order to get access to that platform. Oh. And so I was like, I'm not going to waste this agent's time. This is ridiculous. I even told them I was an agent. So, I mean, just withholding inventory that they say is out there, like, why are we not seeing it?
I wonder what the narrative is to the sellers. I'm curious about that.
Well, it's three-phase marketing approach. We're going to test it. We're going to see if we can get off market. We can push price higher. And yeah, I think there are unique cases. The reality is that I think they're advertising that 94% of all those private exclusives end up on the market, on the MLS. If you look at that number from a different perspective, the question is 94% of those sellers didn't need that option, right? And so only 6% probably really utilized and had a need for that. And so the problem
How many of them left money on the table too because they didn't hit the open market?
Exactly.
That fascinates me.
There's definitely more data on that, you know? And in that pitch, he said that agent that he got the idea from, Rob, sold a home and was a record-breaking sale. But it was also a $6 million home, right? And so let's talk about who the average consumer is, right? Is this really something that a consumer needs to be exposed to? And that's kind of my concern too, is that this is a unique situation that's not applicable for most of the market, but we're exposing this option to every single seller that they work with. And I think that's part of the problem, right? We're advisors. Our goal is to understand what is our clients' end state and what does success look like for them. Then we have to reconstruct that and figure out what the strategy is. And we have to understand all of the options, but not all of the options should be presented to every single seller because it's confusing. They only do this a handful of times in their life, and they're trusting on you as the agent to advise them correctly. So we're putting information out there that isn't applicable to 94% of the consumers out there. And honestly, in this market, see how things change. If you test that market, off market on those private exclusives for 2 weeks, and then you come on the market here, it could be a completely different market and you've lost total momentum. If you put your home on the market in Denver at the end of April, you're probably under contract and sold by now. You put it on the first week of May, the market hit a wall. And so you're losing time at a time when sellers don't have the opportunity to lose time.
And the sellers don't understand. Like they do just trust the person that they had a relationship with or that farmed their neighborhood or whatever. And they're like, this is not my thing. I just want to sell my home. And so you advise me and they go with, whatever the agent advises.
Exactly. And I think that's part of the problem, right? And so the question is, why is Compass not working with other brokerage leaders? And the reality is that agents are a susceptible populace. They have been in a recession for 3 years. They're hurting. The sales.
Tired,
they're tired after a pandemic. And then we have the high interest rate.
The deals are so hard right now that like people are working their tails off, making a lot less money, in my opinion. So I think agents are tired. They're doing less transactions. They're looking for the next thing that's going to kind of help propel their business. And that's what he's promising them.
He's saying that Zillow is the enemy because they're taking your leads from you. The reality is 2 to 3% of deals are transacted on Zillow. So yeah, are you missing some sign calls? Maybe, but what's the guarantee that that client's going to actually work with you, And so I do agree that there needs to be some changes of how listings are promoted and how the agent's information is shared. But at the end of the day, Zillow is a marketing platform and it allows mass exposure of our homes. And that's ultimately what sells a home. So I think just looking at this situation from a different perspective is really important, especially right now, because if you open up any social media and you see a post about this, it's Compass agents versus non-Compass agents. It's combative. It's argumentative. If you dissent, you will be attacked if you're not a Compass agent. I mean, I've literally gotten an email from an agent saying that my perspective was wrong because I posted a comment. And Rob Refkin actually blocked me on Instagram because I dissented early on in this campaign. And so if you're a leader, then you're welcoming this conversation, right? But at the end of the day, these agents are being spoon-fed. Like there's a lack of leadership overall in this entire industry. So it makes sense that they're gravitating for someone who's theoretically spearheading. But what is he spearheading for? And that's the question. Compasses had not made money in years. They lose like hundreds of millions of dollars every year. Yet in that video, he talked about how their database has 100 million subscribers in it. They've spent over $1 billion building a tech platform. Why are they building a tech platform? It's really to become the next platform, to take over, and the reason why it kind of fires me up a little bit because it's weaponizing the agent's relationship that they've built with consumers. Consumers trust us. And so when their agents are being fed this propaganda and then, influencing consumers to change their habit to really use anything but Zillow, it is disturbing and alarming. And not only does it impact that Compass's agents' ability to maintain the strong relations that they've built, it's impacting all of us. And so when it doesn't matter what brokerage I'm on, it's really the relationship that is being attacked and weaponized for corporate gain. And that's really disturbing.
That's so powerful, Lauryn. One of the things I love about Lauryn is the way that your brain works is you live in the future. She has vision of where the industry or where things are coming. So we were talking about the lawsuits, the commission lawsuits, like 3 or 4 years ago, right? Yeah. Like a long way before. And I would talk to agents around me because I was having discussions with Lauryn. And they would have no idea. Even like in September of 24.
Whenever.
Yeah, September of 24, agents were like, eh. And even today, I still think that the extremeness of the situation of what's changed hasn't really hit agents yet. Like,
I think it is hitting. And
maybe they haven't recognized it yet.
I think it's hitting because they don't know how to have hard conversations. So they're like, oh, it's okay. You don't need to pay that, right? It's okay. You don't need to pay that the rate that we've already negotiated before I show this home. And,
Well, because they don't want to ruffle feathers.
Exactly.
And this is something that I wanted to talk on this so much because we are in a mastermind together with a tremendous group of just the most powerhouse, capable and awesome women, highly productive in the market. And we're having conversations about commissions and I'm observing what they're doing. And I think it's very interesting to me that the deals are so hard right now. Like the amount of time you have to put into each seller and each buyer and each transaction because of inspection and all these negotiations and all the things that are a critical component to getting a deal across the finish line right now just take a tremendous amount of time. So I'm noticing that on one side because I'm part of that too. Mm-hmm. And then on the other side, I'm noticing agents be like, oh, I'll just take 2.5. That's okay. Or, like, hey, I'll just give some of my commission to offset some of the inspection items, right? Mm-hmm. Like the commission now, because of the lawsuits, in my opinion, is being used as a negotiation tool. And I think as agents, if you have less transactions and the ones you do have are exceptionally hard and you're a really good agent, that's the key. You're very, very good at what you do and you give good, solid advice and you're a value to your client. Why should you take a pay cut?
You shouldn't. And then how can you survive? I think that's part of the conversation. So if you are now taking 0.3 or 0.5% less in commission, and then you multiply that across 10, 20 deals, you're making 30, 50 grand less a year in a market that's a recession already. So like, how are you
and
surviving?
Spending more money, right? Yeah. Because on your list, I've been hearing a ton of agents talk about their credit card bills with staging and marketing efforts or whatever you guys have to pay for at scale. And it's expensive. The expense of being an agent has not gone down. Yeah. If I would argue it maybe has gone up because of the amount of time a home.
Well, we're living in a high inflation market, right? We've been in a recession for 3 years, but we've been living in a high inflationary environment. And so there's a huge disconnect between that. And I think if you're a great agent, you need to know your value, defend your value, and be willing to walk away if someone does not see your value. And that's really something that I've been really honing on, because I think when you start discounting, who are you actually discounting? Not only are you discounting yourself, but you're discounting the clients and consumers that see your value and willing to pay you full price, right?
Or that you've closed a transaction with recently.
Yeah.
Right? That paid you full price.
And so when you're managing someone who's doesn't see your value versus someone who sees your value, you're taking away from the people that see that value and is willing to pay you what you're worth. And you're sacrificing that relationship for a paycheck over here with someone that does not see your value. And so coming at it from an abundance mindset is super important. I know that's hard in this market, but that's the only way you continue to foster and grow your business, by really protecting the relationships and with the people who see the value you deliver.
That's what I was thinking, though. So if you are a newer, like you two are both very successful. You've been in your fields for a long time. You have business. If you're a brand new agent and you are lacking that confidence, you're working with buyers
Lauren's been an agent for 7 years.
6 years.
I am an old professional with lots of experience, but
I'm a COVID agent.
Yeah.
But Lauren, like the way that your brain works is so amazing to me. Like you're so smart. You know your shit. Like you can sit down with anybody. You can defend your compensation. Most people, I would argue, can't do that, especially if they're a newer agent. Mm-hmm. And they're like, I just got to pay my bills. Like I'll do whatever, just buy a house.
But I mean, so when I was a new agent, I knew that I didn't know a lot of stuff, right? But I knew there were 3 things that I could figure out. One, I could know the data, right? And so I could know the market, I could understand it, I could speak eloquently about it, and I could calm consumers' fears or concerns and really explain what's going on in the market by studying the data and the economic trends. 2, I need to know the contract, right? And so I needed to understand how could I maneuver within the contract to get my clients to win. And 3rd, it's like, how do I communicate, right? And so understanding how I show up and having that confidence because I have the data, because I know the contract, but plus that equals confidence, right? And so you can fake it till you make it,
So invest more in yourself. Basically, if you're not confident in your ability to add a high value, because that's basically like if you feel like you're worth it. Yeah. It's interesting because I was looking for a therapist for my son. He's never done it before. And I found
you just announced that.
I found this guy that has like a podcast and he's written like 13 books and he's got this very impressive website. And I wrote him an email and he wrote me one back and he's like, for 45 minutes, it's $500 and we don't take insurance. And I was sitting there being like, cool. I don't know for my son's first. No, I don't think that this is, but he knows his value. He knows he's worth it. Right. Mm-hmm. And so good for him. I'm sure that he's toyed around with raising his prices, right? Because he adds that much value to his clients. Right. Mm-hmm. So if you don't feel like you have the experience or the knowledge, the data, the contract, the levers to help your client win, and you can give good advice, then maybe you do accept a lower commission, but then you spend time investing in your field to level up as an agent. Or maybe you align with someone like Lauryn or someone on a good team and you learn from them, right?
But here's the thing, like it costs money to learn, right? I'm sorry, but when I learned, like I recognized, I was searching for the value. What's going to get me the fastest place that where I want to go in the shortest amount of time. And sometimes that costs money. I remember I was on a 60-40 split, when I first started it, and I didn't care, right? Because I saw it was like a pyramid, right? And so as you moved up in volume, your splits got better. And once you got to a certain place, then your splits never changed, even after that year. And I was like, oh, I know I can spend some money now, but I'm getting the reps, I'm getting the experience, and it's worth it, right? And I think people, again, have that scarcity mindset, be like, oh, I can figure it out by myself. Oh, I can run this entire business by myself. I don't need help. Like, I'm going to do it all. But at what cost, right? And I'm not talking about financial, I'm talking about personal. And that's really something that I don't think agents, whether you're young or you're experienced, really are evaluating holistically, is what is the cost of working in this business? Because it's more than just financial. It's family, emotional. There's so many things that I've seen, so much sacrifice that people, consumers in particular, they don't see the sacrifice that their agents or their lenders are doing to support their purchase.
I do think if an agent had a tally of every hour they had spent on a transaction, that they would feel more inclined to not want to give up money. I think part of the problem is that like it's 2.5 or it's 2 or it's 2.8, it's 3.2. Like that's not a real dollars. That's not dollars that they're like looking at their paycheck like somebody else would that works in a corporate office from 8 to 5. And they're like, this is my bonus. It's, in dollars, right? So I think that's part of the problem too, is that they don't know how many hours they're spending on each transaction or each client. And they also, like if they could see their dollar per hour, I think that they would fight more to get what they're worth.
So I think all you have to do is track one transaction. So I work through a CRM with my phone calls and my emails and my text messages. And I can open up any client and I can see, my appointments with them. I can see how many phone calls I've made, how many text messages I sent, how many emails. Like it's overwhelming. I mean, 300 text messages, 20 phone calls, 100 emails, multiple appointments. And that's not even showings, right? And so once you start seeing the time that you're investing, I think you start to understand like, wow, this is a lot, right? And I've done a lot in my professional background, and it's a lot to manage. And not only are you managing a transaction, you're managing human beings who are emotional and who are making the biggest financial purchase of their life. And so
at a time that is extraordinarily challenging to guide them because people are just, it's hard right now. It's hard. You can't help the seller that's feeling very, very overwhelmed by having to give 40 grand to list their house, right? Or the buyer that's like, we need to move. We're busting at the seams, but we can't afford that next home price up. Like you have to have empathy with them, but it takes a lot of time to have these conversations, make them feel comfortable, provide them solutions. So I think, in my opinion, and Elise says it all the time, I've been on a soapbox about buyer's agent commission because I watch my partners and how hard they work. And I want to be their advocate. I'm like, you deserve to get paid. You're a very good agent. You know what I mean? And if I tell your client, like here, we're, because we asked for a $25,000 concession or because there's 3 offers already, here's you showing them paying their buyer's agent commission or a portion of it. And the buyer, if it's going to help them accomplish their goal,
and it's not going to cost them anything more most of the time.
Yeah, they're like, okay, like they don't make a fuss about it. Like they understand the work you're putting in. They understand the value that you're providing to them. So it's something about the agents like.
Well, I mean, it's the same thing
self-worth or something because
Compass is manufacturing a problem that does not exist for most of the market. And as agents, we're manufacturing a problem that does not exist for consumers who see our value.
Yeah, it's so true. Yeah. Say that one more time. Hold on. This was genius. Say it one more time.
The whole thing?
Yeah, the whole thing.
Just like Compass is manufacturing a problem that doesn't exist for 94% of consumers, agents are manufacturing a problem and conversation that does not exist with their clients who see their value.
I love that.
I mean, I've had clients that they've had to pay me, right? But it's also about your process, right? It's not a surprise to any of my clients if this happens. And it starts with, our buyer consultations. And Jess and I work really well together. And I think that's part of it is because, I take the initial strategy call. I talk with them 15, 30 minutes, answer their questions, understand where they are, understand where their timeline is, understand what their, concerns and fears are. And then from there, it's a soft handoff to Jess for another 15 to 30 minute strategy call. And typically that translates into a pre-approval call. And part of the pre-approval call, you're just showing all the different wickets that consumers honestly have no idea.
They have no clue.
They have no idea.
Clue. They look on the mortgage calculator. They're like, rates are 7. Here's my price point. All the houses in that price point are junk.
Yeah.
And that they come to me like that.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay.
The mortgage calculator is freezing up real estate deals in the United States.
Yeah.
So that's a different topic we could talk about. But then from there, they see the pathway to financially achieving their goals, right? They understand like, oh, I actually can afford a house in this 7% interest rate environment. And so once they're pre-approved.
In the price point that I want, in the neighborhood, I can get, and I can afford the payment. I have enough cash. Like it is possible.
It makes sense. It's not smoke and mirrors,
Yeah.
And then once they're pre-approved, then I do an hour buyer consultation with them on Zoom where I talk about, the market conditions. I talk about the contract, what they're looking for, location, everything. And then I end it with saying, this is my fee. And I'm going to do my best to get this fee from the seller. But there may be a chance, where we can't get all of it or some of it. And you may have to work with Jess to pay that remaining balance. It doesn't mean you need to bring additional funds to the table. There are different levers that we can pull so it's not out of pocket and keeps your monthly payment exactly where you want it to be.
How I explain that in my pre-approval consultation is I say, whenever I ask like, how much money do you have? People always say, oh, I'm putting 20% down. And they always go to down payment. And I'm like, no. How much cash do you have total to invest in a home? And then I say, I don't really want us to think in down payments. I want us to think in like a pie chart. We might need money for down payment, for closing costs, for rate buy down, maybe if that feels like an appropriate thing to do. And then buyer's agent commission, if we're offering on a house that there's more than one buyer interested in it, there may be a way for you to use that lever to help you become the buyer that wins the house. And so when you explain it that way, like I'm not necessarily asking you to bring more money. I'm changing the allocation of the pie chart is basically what it boils down to.
But it's still the same pie.
Yeah, it is. It doesn't mean like if you tell me you have $100,000, I'm not going to be like, here, come bring me 120.
150.
Yeah. So
I feel like I can just foresee the TikTok and the Instagram comments of like, who has $150,000? You did a 1 hour buyer's consultation and I work 40 hours a week and I make $60,000 a year for an entire, like people blow up about this stuff. And so like, what do you say to that? Because everybody gets a layup sometimes, right?
So a couple of things. One, what do you have? What does the pie look like? And then what are you trying to achieve? And then we'll figure it out from there.
Yeah.
And so you don't need to have this ginormous Costco pie. Maybe you have like a little appetizer pie.
I was telling Lauren about, we have a client, that's coming to the table with $3,000.
Yep.
His rate, I think, is 5.875. He's coming to the table with $3,000 and his pie looks very different, right?
Yeah.
It's not a $100,000 pie. It's a $3,000 pie and he's stoked,
I was meaning towards the compensation part of it. Because there's always people that, it's like the trend, right? Everyone, real estate agents are way over.
Well, that buyer may not be the one that's competing in a multiple offer situation that they have to pay their agent. That's, ultimately at the end of the day, their path might not go that way.
Okay.
Right? Like I just had a buyer pay my buyer's agent entire commission because it was a high price point, 5 offers. They really wanted the house, so I think it depends on whatever they have to work with. So if they are a first-time home buyer, they're buying a condo. She and I just negotiated, we got a 4.25% rate for a veteran recently. 4.25%.
Permanent
awesome. Buy down, so I think that each buyer has its unique set of circumstances. And that's where the value of having a high, value real estate team is we look at each person as our own puzzle. and we say, how do we help them accomplish their goals? And there are buyers that it's just not simply time for them, right? Like it's just not time yet.
But we can create a path to make that time, right? And so right now, if you're thinking you want to buy a home and you have no idea, you don't have money, you think it's impossible, which honestly is like a lot of Gen Zs and millennials, they don't think that owning a home is possible. But I think the message is that the American dream still exists. You can still become a homeowner. You just need to have a conversation. So if you don't have the funds today, how do we create a plan so you have them tomorrow? Because if you're not having these conversations and you're just going to Reddit or Google or ChatGPT to answer your questions, I promise you're not getting advice that's real world, tailored to you, and will solve your problem. And part of that too, I would say, going back to the mortgage calculator, we live in like an instant demand society, right? And so when you're filling out those pre-approval forms, I was at the Housing Wires conference last week in Colorado Springs, and the CEO of Rocket was there. And Rocket is essentially building a platform that says that they want it fast and easy. It was, what would you say? Fast, good, and cheap. Yeah. So essentially they're trying to build this fast, good, and cheap platform. And I'm just sitting in the audience. I'm like,
it's impossible. You can't have all three. You have to pick two of the three.
Yeah. And I was like, that's great. And I think that's great for a certain specific segment of consumers, right? Totally. The professionals who have funds, who bought and sold a bunch of times, don't want to be bothered down, just like want it quick and easy, right? But I think for the majority of consumers, they have really difficult portfolios and we have really difficult market conditions, and they don't want fast and cheap and good, right? They want really good advice that meets their desires and needs and gets them into a home.
Well, they end up on the phone with a kid in a headset that's 26 years old, that's been a lender for 9 months, trying to guide them on the biggest financial decision of their life.
But they're not even guiding.
No, but they're saying like, where do you want your payment? Okay, cool. This, there is no guidance. There is no problem solving or looking at your entire portfolio. I just had a gal that she was referred to me, she had no money, none. But I found out she had a 401k, and she was so reluctant, and she was like, that's all I have basically. And so she was so reluctant to leverage it. And so I basically had a conversation with her about how you're not spending it, you're reallocating it to build more wealth for yourself. So if your number one concern right now is that you don't have a lot of wealth, this would be actually a really smart way. And she ended up going under contract on a really cute little townhome, and took money from her 401k. And so, I think that, fast, cheap, and good there will always be, in my opinion, there will always be a market for high value agents. So you've heard me say, I think the industry is splitting. There's a bunch of people going to become commoditized, basically. And then those are the people that I just need to do high volume and low comp, right? Basically. And then there's another demographic of people that are going to continue to solve problems that take a lot of time and a lot of experience and knowledge and guidance. And that costs money. You can't do all of that for super cheap at a high volume rate. So that has to exist too.
So, I mean, that's kind of where come full circle a little bit till we talked about the Compass versus Zillow model. The reason why Compass is doing is, one, they want to become the platform, but two, it protects the old model, right? And when I say old model, it means the unskilled, crappy agents that are out there that are doing, a decent percentage of the deals and not really adding true value to the consumer. And so
to the industry,
right? In fact, it's hurting it, right? And so by trying to become the next platform, you're protecting the low caliber agents that are out there instead of letting a market naturally evolve, which, Zillow is part of, right? Zillow and all the other companies want to create tech and want to streamline the buying and selling process. And as a result, we will lose agents as a result of that. And that's okay, because those are the agents who aren't delivering the high value. Some consumers will want just a door opener. That's what they want. That's great. They're not getting good advice. And I work with clients who worked with door openers before, and then they have problems when they sell, because
those are the agents that are ruining everything.
Yes.
That's why people are saying that you're overpaid and you're not doing anything, and you worked on that for 1 week and you're making all this money and you're ripping people off.
They're giving a bad name to the whole industry. And so I think maybe we look at it and say there's multiple types of professionals out there in any industry. Like if you look at like law as an example, you can go on LegalZoom and create a legal document, or you can go hire the most high-powered, most expensive attorney out there. There's multiple platforms to accomplish a goal. And, you probably wouldn't want to use LegalZoom under certain circumstances, just like you wouldn't want to have a very young, unexperienced agent open a door for you that you just met online because you pushed a button.
Yeah. And again, I mean, why is that agent not more experienced, right? Like, where are the standards? Where is the caliber? Agents are paying so much money to these brokerages, and what kind of training are they getting, right? No one holds each other accountable. They'll take anyone who wants to sign up, and that's a big part of the problem, right? Like, we are not raising the bar. We're just lowering it and continuing to keep it lower because a lower bar creates more money for the people at the top.
How did you get your training? Like, you're not on a big team. You didn't...
I aligned with a brokerage that had a lot of high performers in it. I was willing to pay 40% of my commission to learn and be around that. I had a great mentor, and I really leveraged my previous work experience to it directly translates to what I do now in real estate. And so, just kind of sharing who I am a little bit. I went to the Naval Academy. I spent 14 years in total in the Navy. I drove warships, big and small. I led teams, and I did public affairs and strategic communication at the Pentagon, where I was dealing with media relations, both national and international, crisis communication like no other, really advising some of the most senior leaders in the Navy, both uniform and civilian, on their communication strategy, whether that's talking to the media or going to the Hill and testifying. And so having that experience really taught me how to advise, right? I've never viewed myself as a salesperson. I am a true strategic advisor, and I'm helping people solve their problems, achieve their goals, and really mitigating risk. And I think that that's what, as a profession, we need to shift towards. It's not about just selling homes. It's about unlocking opportunity for the average American to achieve safety and stability through their homes.
I feel so sorry for the consumer, because hearing you talk about mitigating risk and, the things that you're doing to protect them, the negotiations I watch you do on your client's behalf, the extra steps you take with buyers on inspection to just get extra things checked out because you've had experience. Like, I feel bad for the consumer that pushes button to get house. You know what I mean? Like, I really do, because they're going to end up with a very, very expensive problems.
Oh, yeah. So, I mean, I have a perfect example of this one, and it's a deal that we worked on together a few months ago. So there's essentially a duplex, and a luxury duplex that I sold. And I sold the one side. The right side sold a couple months earlier. And, when we were negotiating inspection on the left side of the duplex, when I was selling as the buyer's agent, something came up with the deck, right? And the deck, this property was only 6 years old, and the entire deck needed to be rebuilt because the builder didn't use pressure treated wood. And it was like a $19,000 repair that I was able to negotiate on behalf of my clients. And, now it's being fixed, and it'll be great for them once it's done. But as we were going through those inspection negotiations, I looked at the right side, and I was like, oh, they also had like a $19,000 concession. What's that all about? And so I called the agent. I first looked up the agent. I wanted to understand the buyer's agent. I wanted to understand his experience. He'd sold like a handful of deals. And I was like, okay. And so I called him, and I was like, hey, you sold this you represented the buyer. Did you have anything that come up on inspection about the deck? And he's like, oh yeah, the inspector said the deck would probably need to be fixed in a few years. And I said, did you know that they didn't use pressure treated wood and needs to be rebuilt? And he's like, oh no, I didn't know that. And so they didn't even do further deck inspections as a result. And his buyer on a $1.1 million property, now is going to have to spend $19,000-$20,000 to get their deck rebuilt. But here is the kicker of it all. After I hung up with him, he texted me and said that he was interested in talking with me because he's also a lender. So he was dual licensed at both getting a paycheck from the financial piece of it and then also the agent side. And I was just like, alarmed.
Yeah.
Like, are you being a fiduciary here? Like, did you really earn what that you made on that? Like,
Well,
that's
you just
ridiculous.
exposed that he did a terrible job as a realtor. And now he's like, ooh, send me your loan.
Yeah. I'm like, yeah. I mean, I would hate to be on the right side watching the left side get a deck replaced and being like, what's wrong with my deck now?
Yeah.
Why is this same deck now being, replaced 6 years afterwards?
Inspections are something that like I do not envy that part of your guys' job, especially now, because it just feels
It's
like
so hard.
it feels like a really challenging part. What are you doing for your sellers to add as much value as possible as it relates to inspection?
Yeah. Preparing them ahead of time, right? And so not only preparing them that, one, as we look at the net sheets, like you got to set some money aside because you're going to get asked for a rate buy down. Then you got to set some money aside because you're going to get beat up on inspection. And part of it too is like making sure we're going to market correctly, right? I know sellers don't want to invest money, but there's a difference between homes that sit and homes that sell. And even in the shifting market, it's becoming a little bit blurrier. But essentially, like your home has to be properly prepped to get an offer. Sometimes I walk through these homes, they smell, there's deferred maintenance everywhere, like the yard's a mess, like. And what are you paying your agent for? Like, this is stuff that you need to take care of beforehand. And part of it is like, I also, when I sit at that table with my sellers, first thing I tell them after I've toured the home, I said, I'm going to tell you what you need to hear, not what you want to hear. Is that okay? And they're all like, yes, because people just want guidance, right?
Yes.
Like, I'm sorry, if you can't have a hard conversation, you should not be in this industry. And you have to be willing to walk away.
And you may as well cut ties then instead of going through a tremendously painful transaction and continually bumping up against each other because you aren't aligned on what's going on and what they want.
Exactly.
So why not face it head on in the first conversation? So I really respect that line of like, I'm going to tell you what you need to hear.
Yeah, I think that if they don't like it, then I have my answer.
Yeah, you don't need to waste your time.
Yeah, time or my money,
Yeah.
right? And so I think a lot of agents, one, they don't know how to price, and it's becoming more difficult to price in the shifting market that we have right now. And so they kind of just throw a number at the wall, and they figure once they have the listing, they'll be able to talk the seller down once they're not getting showings. I had a listing appointment a couple of weeks ago, and it was for a seller who been in their home for a while, and they were interviewing me and someone else. And, I was very transparent with them up front of like what I thought about the pricing and everything. I called all the listing agents before our appointment in the neighborhood just to get an understanding of, what's the activity like, what's the showing levels, what are buyers saying? And, I gave them a number based off of not even seeing their home, but just what I think that things were, what it looked like in their market, right? And so these sellers were also potentially buying, and so they were contingent buyers, and if they got a bridge loan, like it's so complicated. I could go into much more detail, but ultimately the other agent that they met with told them that they could sell it for $900,000 and that he'd be ready to put it on the market the following week. And I was like, I can't guarantee you're going to get $900,000. 2, your house needs work to even get close to $900,000. 3, do you understand how a bridge loan works and what the financial ramifications are and the different things that you're going to be carrying and considering? They only knew about rate. They didn't know about rate buy downs or anything like that. And so after I talked with them, I was pretty blunt, but they decided that they didn't want to sell because the time wasn't right, right? And so if they had worked with that other agent, their home would be sitting on the market. Maybe they're under contract on another home, wasting money because their home's not selling.
Can we talk about that really quick? Because I'm so curious. Right now, it feels very challenging to advise a seller that owns a home that wants to buy a different home and they want to transition between homes. So during COVID, it was really easy. We do a bridge loan. We help them go non-contingent. They had to be. And then they put their house on the market and it sold like that. And so it was just like magic. It was perfect, except they got beat up on the buy side. And then even like 2022, it felt like it was still fairly easy. Now feels exceptionally hard. Like even over 23 and 24, 25 feels like a very tricky year to transition between homes because let's say you go contingent, that seller is at risk and they want that buyer, but how long is it gonna take to sell that person's house? So that feels like most sellers don't really want to embark on a contingency. But then you transition the risk to the buyer's side and you make them non-contingent, even if they can qualify, get a bridge loan. What's scary about that is they go under contract, they close, and then they go to turn around and sell their home. And the market has softened, shifted, hit a wall. They have a bridge loan and a primary mortgage. You know, it feels scary. I mean, I talked to an agent that we did a transaction like this and they still haven't sold their home, which is the first one I know of. So it's challenging. Like, what do you think is the path?
It's become like again, the market shifted in Denver very quickly this spring. And, you know, buyers who I was using bridge loans with and priced their home before we went under contract, 6 weeks later, I can't guarantee that they're even going to get close to that price, you know? And that's like the scary thing about it because of how fast it changed. And now they're in a very difficult financial situation.
Yeah.
And so bridge loans, I think, have been great in the past couple of years, but now buyers need to kind of evaluate things a little bit differently. And that might mean that, one, if you're okay with doing the bridge loan, that's the best way you're going to get under contract. We'll be able to tap into your equity. You're going to be able to move out, and then we're going to be able to make repairs, stage your home, and really present it as best as possibly can.
To get the most top dollar.
Yeah, that's the best way you're going to get the most money. The challenge now is I don't know what the home's going to sell for, right? And so that's been very difficult and kind of having to adapt as a result of this issue. So kind of moving forward, I'm just going to tell my clients, you have the bridge loan option. The pros of that, your house is going to look great. The cons of that is you may be holding your bridge loan costs, your new mortgage, and your old mortgage for an indeterminate amount of time. So you're going to have potentially 3 payments, and I don't know what your home's going to sell for, you know, and like I can make an educated guess, but really I've been listing homes this spring and I've been calling all the agents around the homes I'm listing. They're not getting any showings, like it's dead, buyers are not motivated. And yeah, are their homes selling? Absolutely. But I'm talking in like areas that have been historically more resilient than other parts of town, like Arvada, the 8004 zip code, Englewood, you know, the great little homes that are facing some challenges. Highlands has like 4 months of inventory right now, you know? And so if you decide to go to the bridge loan, just you have to understand that there's risk involved with that. And so the other option is, you know, more of a logistical headache, right? You put your home on the market, you're still living in it, you're doing showings while living in, having to keep it clean and upkept, and then you're selling. And then if you're lucky, right? You may be able to get 1 to 2 months of a rent back to go find your replacement home. But the reality is you may need to go find a short-term rental and put your home into.
I think the double move, although that's, I guess maybe as the inventory raises, because the fear of a double move in the past is like, what if you can't, what if you can't find something, right?
Yeah, but here's why, as the seller's agent, why would I advise my client to accept a contingent offer right now?
No, you get your house on the market.
Yeah, you get it under contract.
Maybe you even move into your interim housing.
Yeah, that's much better.
Put all your stuff in storage. You know, and then you can do the thing you need to do to get top dollar for their house.
Yeah.
And then they're a non-contingent buyer in this short term.
Exactly.
I mean, that might be the path. I do think the bridge loan thing, a couple things I want to say. One, the term bridge loan they are not the same across the board. Like I'm hearing agents talk about a bridge loan that's 2.5% of the exit home price, and it makes me just so furious because there's bridge loan options out there that are wildly reasonable, like they cost hardly nothing. So don't allow your seller to pay a 2.5% of their exit home cost in a bridge loan. That's number one. Number two, there are ways that a good, valuable relationship can mitigate risk. So for example, in the buyer's seat, they have the negotiation, right? So if they're non-contingent, they're in a better negotiation position. So we can talk about some other levers like closing date. Like I'm seeing some contracts go through with 45 to 60 days, right? And then you can try to time it to where you go 45 to 60 days out, but you're trying to go past the first of that month. So then your payment is due even 60 days later. So theoretically, we could probably, let's see, we're in June right now. let's say it was early August, we could get someone's first payment on their new house due in October.
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah.
Like you and I could put a deal together where we get that seller's first payment on their new house due in October. And then there's ways we can mitigate risk on the sales side, which is one of the things Lauryn and I have started working on is learning how to sell homes like the builders do.
Yeah.
Because the builders have had a tremendous amount of experience.
Here we go.
And
Settle in.
This is awesome.
I know.
the builders have had a tremendous amount of demand. Like I hear people say, I'm going to have to go new construction because of the rate. So Lauryn, this was Lauryn's idea, but she came to me and she said, how do we sell homes the way that the builders do? And there's some nuances that we had to chat through. It depends on the loan type and the down payment. And, but we basically were doing the math so that she could come up with a campaign to help her sellers. And the reason behind this is that Lauryn believes that the next few months are going to be pretty rough for sellers in Denver, and there's no end in sight because we don't see any like tangible things that are going to happen that are all of a sudden going to help the housing market, and more inventory keeps coming to market. So theoretically, that means sellers are facing some pretty, challenging conditions to sell their home. And as more inventory rises, it probably means longer days on market and more of their money, of their equity going out the window.
Exactly.
Right? And so Lauryn's idea was like, if we could position ourselves early on to have a good chunk of money go out the window right out of the gate, but at a fair price to where the seller at the end of the day can budget for that. And there's less uncertainty, less time, less anxiety, less stress.
Yeah.
And it was pretty brilliant. And you started, this is very, very new, like within the last couple weeks, so we don't have a ton of data, but you have a couple.
Enough.
You have some.
Yeah.
So tell us about how it's gone for you.
Yeah. So essentially, like I'm presenting two options to sellers. We can list the traditional way where we put a price and we hope we get a buyer, and we know that 60-70% of them are going to ask for a concession, right? The challenge is homes aren't moving as quickly and inventory is rising, and we're heading into the summer months. And we know in the second half of the year, prices traditionally just go down. That's just the ebb and flow of our market. But with inventory levels at 2011 levels, like there's concern, right, of where are we going to sell at? Especially the people who are sitting eventually are going to drop their price to sell because they have to sell, and that becomes the new comp in the neighborhood. And so we're essentially we could be chasing the people who are desperate. And so, that's the reality of just selling traditionally. And you're going to have to probably put a more conservative price out there because that's what buyers are searching right now, primarily about price, when they're doing their home searches. And what I mean by that is when they're setting up their filters of what price they're looking at. And so, if you have this price, the reality is that you're going to be on the market. If you didn't price it or the market's moving, you're going to have to drop it 4 to 5% just to get some new eyes on it. So that's automatically a price drop. Once you get an offer there, if you do get an offer there, then you're going to get, another 10, 20, 30K request from the concessions from inspection to rate buy downs, right? And so that's the reality of just selling the traditional way. And so as the market shifted, and what my lesson was like, I listed a home in Arvada on May 1st in a neighborhood that's traditionally been pretty hot, right, and in demand. And I priced it competitive with the comps that were closing that month or had just closed. And, it's kind of been sitting. And so I made a 20K price drop, right? And it was kind of crickets. And I was like, geez, like these price drops aren't working. And so I dropped it again just to try to make it competitive, another 30K. And it's still been crickets. And I was like, wow.
$50,000.
$50,000 in a hot neighborhood that is desirable, that's entry level for first-time home buyers. And I was just really, and I take pride in my pricing. I'm a pretty great pricer. Obviously shifting markets, that changes. But the fact that we have dropped so much and it's been crickets, and I know it's been crickets not only for me, but for every other agent in that specific neighborhood, because I called all of them. And so it's the market. And I was like, oh shit, sorry, this isn't working. Like what's going on in the market right now that is not showing up in the data, right? And so I can't even look at the old reports anymore because it's not real time. And that's the challenge. Like we're using old data to inform and advise our clients when the market's moving in a way that, it's hard to predict sometimes. And so once I saw that, I called Jess. I was like, we got to figure out how to change this, right? Because it's clearly not about price for the client, for the buyers. It's all about their payment. Mm-hmm. And so we reverse engineered, just like you're saying, how do we market a payment, right? And so what we did was like, if I'm going to start at this price, right? And I know that if I don't move the home, I'm going to have to drop it 4 to 5%. What does that 4 to 5% look like from a financial number? That ended up translating to about 4.5 points that a buyer would pay for a loan. And so what I'm saying is that listing at maybe a little bit of a higher price, knowing that we're going to have to negotiate, but advertising a monthly payment and advertising a 5.5% permanent rate. Because buyers, I don't think, if they're savvy, they don't want temporary rates anymore because they've seen how that's worked in the past couple of years. But a 5.5% interest rate, ooh, I could make that work. That literally saves $800, $900, $600 a month for buyers.
That's what I was going to ask you, is that if you take the price and you cut it $50,000, what is it's much better for the buyer to have it buy down the rate versus lower the price of the home.
It's like
right?
Every $1,000 in price with current rates of 7, let's say, is like $6 a month in payment. So
right. So
so
does nothing.
$50,000 is $300 where,
it's not enough, right?
It's not enough. It's not moving the needle. And $50,000 is an extreme example too. Like most sellers are like, what if I drop 15,000? And you're like, that's $90 to the buyer. That means nothing. Like the buyer is not biting off on $90. The other piece of data that we had was that buyer guide that we have, where basically for the last 3 years, we've gathered what every buyer wants in their payment. Because I asked them, like, what is your comfort payment where you'll be able to sleep well at night and not feel house poor? And then I look at the price point that they have been kind of thinking they want to move into because they have a goal. So I have aligned a price point, a down payment amount that's typical for that price point, and then where they want their payment. And they are way off, like $1,000 a month in some price points. And so we can now reverse engineer this strategy with that payment guide and say, we don't have to say 5.5. We can be like, how do we get Arvada wants a $5,000 payment. How do we reverse engineer? It's currently $5,600. So
it was more than that. It was like $6,000. Yeah.
So how do we get it to 5 and then advertise 5? And one thing you said when you got here, which is, why do we sell houses the way we do with price? Yeah. It's all prices and big dollars and not payment, right? And like the way they do in the car industry.
Yeah, you watch a car commercial and it's all about what your monthly payment is. So why are we not doing the same thing right now, right? And so that's really kind of just, how do we solve the problem? And this gets back to the advisor piece. The people who are just opening doors aren't truly advising, and so buyers think homeownership is not possible. But when you have a true advisor, we can show you the way to get there and to achieve that monthly payment that only achieves your goals, but also achieves the seller's goals too.
Like there's a puzzle there.
Yeah.
And that's the strategic advisor component, is putting the puzzle together with knowledge.
Yep.
You know your market data, you know your contract.
Yeah.
You have relationships in the industry. This is something that the door openers or the commoditized sector of our industry will never be able to do unless they up-level themselves to be a part of this camp.
Yeah.
And the consumer, beware. Like you need to know who you're working with.
Caveat emptor, right?
Yeah.
So like, I think it's really exciting. I think it's been, I launched this on 2 listings in the past week. And so I have one Arvada listing listed at $885 in a desirable neighborhood. And, it was on the market for like 2 weekends, and then Jess and I came up with a strategy. I presented it to my clients, gave them options, and they were like, well, yeah, that makes sense. Of course. Like, let's go that way. And so I dropped it $100. I've never dropped a price by $100. I was so embarrassed, but it was really more to just spur more eyes on the property. Yeah. So not only did I drop the price $100, I put a little banner on the primary photo, which I choose the best photo as the first photo, not the front of the house necessarily. And I said, offering a permanent 5.5% seller-assisted interest rate. And then I put some verbiage in the public remarks section of just like some basic high-level stuff, like, get this home for, $5,000 a month with 10% down. Because that's what buyers are trying to solve for, and that's what the mortgage calculator is not providing them. And also, like, their agent or their lender isn't providing them this advice either. So I feel like as the listing agent, I am now having to do the work of the buyer's agent to explain to these buyers who are searching online how to make this house affordable for them. And so, that's been just over, what's today, Tuesday? It's been a week since I launched that listing. I relaunched the listing with the $100 price drop and the new banner and the 5.5% interest rate. I've had 5 showings in the past week. Wow. No one else in that entire neighborhood and inventory is building up is getting any showings. Yeah. It's been crickets.
That's amazing.
So I've been able to get buyers in the door, right? And protect my seller's bottom line at the same time. We don't have an offer yet. But I think we're getting close, right? Yeah. And so at least I'm getting activity while no one else is getting activity.
That's cool. Yeah.
So the other listing that I launched in Englewood, these are actually bridge clients who, priced the home before they close on their current home. And now we're kind of having to deal with a principal mortgage plus a bridge loan. And the numbers got tight, right? Because the market shifted and no homes were moving in that neighborhood. So the house looks great. They did the work I told them to do, got the right staging, and launched it on Thursday afternoon, advertising a 5.5% interest rate and a $4,000 a month payment. And I hosted an open house on Friday afternoon, which I think Friday afternoon open houses actually work pretty well, just kind of a caveat.
Interesting.
Yeah, I've been liking them. And I had a buyer walk in the door and super excited about the house. And I asked her, like, well, how did you see the house? What was your interest? And she's like, oh, I saw it online and I saw, the 5.5% interest rate. And I was like, oh, yes, it worked, right? I got this buyer to come check out this home on Friday afternoon.
Yeah.
Well, fast forward to last night, I got an offer from that buyer.
Wow.
Yeah. And so I got an offer from that buyer. They asked for a $20,000 rate concession, which this will be published after we're under contract. But we were projecting more, right? We were projecting having to give more money. And so, we're still in active negotiations. But we have that offer that we're negotiating right now. Yesterday afternoon, I got another text from an agent whose buyers who had shared the listing with them specifically because of the 5.5% interest rate offer. Right. And the agent called me and we talked and I asked her, I was like, why did they reach out? And she's like, well, at this price in this neighborhood with that rate, like it becomes affordable for the buyers. Right. And so I think if you launch with this strategy, like you're solving the problems that no one else is solving for these buyers.
And you're saving your seller money.
Oh yeah.
Like that's what's so cool is like, it's a win-win-win. It's a win for you. It's a win for your buyer. It's a win for the seller. It's again, putting the puzzle together.
It's exciting. I mean, honestly, I feel like after the commission lawsuits, the industry changed and it's changed in a good way, right? And we've talked about some of the negative things that have happened. But as an agent who loves the strategy, loves advising, loves solving these problems, I feel like I have so much more wiggle room to be creative for my clients than I actually ever have before because of the changes in the industry. And so, I think that there's a lot more that needs to be done. And I think it's really exciting. But I think that we as agents need to rise up from the bottom up, right? And we need to start demanding these changes and start innovating and start thinking differently, start holding our brokerages accountable, right? Like, why is this such a top-down approach to advising and training agents when we're the ones doing the deals? We're the ones making the brokerages money, right? Like we're the ones that are doing the hard work on the ground, solving problems, yet we're being told from a top-down approach of how to do our business when really it should be led from the bottom up.
I agree with that completely. Well, Lauryn, how do people find you? I know we have to mention your LinkedIn because you put such incredible content out on LinkedIn. So is that the best place for people to find you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Find me on LinkedIn or LaurynDempsey.com.
LaurynDempsey.com. Well, thank you for being here today. I learned a ton and it was a really powerful conversation.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah.
It's always fun.
Thank you for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe.